Welcome to another episode of Market Skycast, BluSky's official podcast. Now, I wasn't here last week, and I got to tell you, I had some FOMO watching Matt host this thing, having all the fun, watching you guys talk about the market, but I am back, and I'm ready to get this done. Now, a couple housekeeping things before we get started. We still have this amazing sale on a launch plan. It's on for the 50K launch plan. Welcome 26 is the code. You can get that thing for $30 to start trading. I think it's one of the best deals in the prop spaces. And who else has daily payouts for $30 to get started? So welcome 26. Grab your launch plan if you're not a customer yet, and then let's get going. And secondly, I don't know if you guys are in the BluSky Discord, but if you are not, in addition to these coaches right here, Coach Becky, Coach Matt, and Coach Riz, we have Mike Tolbert, the president of BluSky, and I've seen that man run up $500,000 in the last 3 weeks on stream live. If you want to see a big boy player, a heavy hitter in the market, somebody who has been in the World Series of trading, join the Discord, join in at Market Open, and you will see how the pros do it. In addition to Becky's lab, Matt's lab, and Coach Riz's live trading. Now that we got that out of the way, now you guys were without last week, but you guys still did the economic data, earnings, all that. Now, Becky, I know you talked about FOMC, but the minutes this time.
Yes.
That's usually on Wednesday. It's at 2 o'clock. Some people think it's a big deal. Some people don't. What did you think?
I think it was stereotypical FOMC meeting minutes, which was a whole lot of nothing. It should not be a red folder. It never should have in the first place. But I think that it's misconstruing the urgency of what these folders mean. And so what we talked about last week was just that not all red folders are created equal. Some should have heavier weight, some should have less weight. And the minutes last week were true to form. They did not cause any movement in the market. There was no volatility associated with that because it was old news. It was just basically the filing of the data that was reported that was announced at the meeting the weeks prior. So yeah, it was exactly what we were anticipating, of not something to worry about. But it's a lot of question that people have when they look ahead at Forex, which I love that new traders are doing that. They're being cognizant of these potential data points. But again, not all created equal, and this was true for the minutes. So that one is something you can not so worry about so much every time you see it every 6 weeks.
Now, I don't know about you, but when I first started trading futures, everybody made it seem out to be like a huge thing, like FOMC minutes. Oh my God, don't trade during this. Did you feel the same way back then?
I didn't know what I didn't know. And so when you see FOMC, you're like, oh, cringe. I definitely don't want to touch that. And so I definitely was misled in the beginning as well. So after my first few times, it sunk in where I was like, yeah, that's nothing. That's a nothing burger. Move on. And so now I know it's quick to me that like it's not a thing to derail me at all. And so it's good though. I love it when new traders ask that question because they want to be careful. But definitely that one's nothing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it should be a red folder. And whoever makes it a red folder, take the Sharpie away from their hand, put it yellow, maybe not even yellow. I don't know. But
Need some more colors.
Yeah, right, exactly. Now, Coach Matt, I know you talked about GDP,
Yeah.
which by the time we're filming this, it hasn't come out yet. But you're the earnings guy. I call you Mr. Earnings. So, what happened last week that surprised you, didn't surprise you, or what do you want to kind of focus on for this segment?
Well, two things, Justin. Number one, I don't think there's anybody more happy that you're back than I am. So thank you for being back.
You mean you
That's
didn't have
number
fun
one.
hosting and answering questions and
He always
talking?
has fun.
You know what? I like asking questions. This is true, but I usually get asked the questions, and so I kind of like that role a little bit more. But no, I did enjoy hosting. You just do such a fantastic job.
Oh, thanks.
And I don't live up to your hosting abilities there, Justin. So it's really as simple as that. But you know, on the earnings side of the equation, there was a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of a calm before the storm of next week's earnings reports. But you know, obviously, I'm always going to be anchoring on the earnings side of the equation. I see that as the real truth that comes into the market on a quarterly basis. Out of all the other billion conversations, I'd like to have the truth, and that's earnings. And the number one company that was reporting earnings this week was Walmart. Obviously, the only trillion-dollar company to report this week was Walmart. And two things out of Walmart. Number one, they were dethroned out of the highest revenue company in the market. That now goes to Amazon. Amazon has the highest revenue handles. And let's not feel too bad for Walmart. They did come in at $190.6 billion in revenue on the quarter. So they're still doing okay. they're still.
I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry for them. Let's say that.
Yeah, they're not getting in the food stamp line anytime soon for the Walmart executives. But and that was kind of the strength of the report was their revenue handle. EPS came in really, really light at 1% beat, and for other people out there, 1% beat might be good enough. But when the average market beat is 7%,
Which we talk about all the time.
it doesn't change. You got to be better than the market. Walmart doesn't do that. And the biggest issue was a little bit of a drop on forward guidance. And that's always going to be the most important thing for a stock when it comes to how they perform, not only on the earnings release, but how they perform post-release. There's two parts of the equation. You got the top and the bottom line numbers, which are about how did you do for me in the last quarter, and then you got the forward guidance, which is how you're going to do for me next quarter. And what Walmart said is we're going to do a little bit worse than we expected. They dropped forward-looking guidance for quarter one on EPS from 68 down to 64. So not a big drop, but a drop nonetheless. Shows a little bit of weakness on that consumer spending side of the equation, and that's the importance of Walmart when it comes to the macro analysis. It kind of gives us an insight on those consumers, and Walmart sees those consumers as a little bit weak right now.
Now that's important, but something I just noticed that's a little bit more important. You're not wearing a Miami hat today. You're wearing a New York hat. I just noticed that.
You want me to get one of the 38 Miami hats I have right over there?
Yeah, here we go.
I'm
No, that's
sorry.
funny.
I'm sorry. It's blasphemy. I'm gonna be rocking all Dolphin gear next week.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. No, that's great though. Obviously, one of the most important retail stores in the country, and I like the fact that you said, Amazon finally took them over. I wonder if that's going to keep trending or if it's just going to be a battle.
Honestly, it's been slowly but surely for 10 years on that storyline. But 10 years ago, it was like at 110 billion was the number one revenue, and now it's at 190, and Amazon's close to 200. I mean, these numbers are outlandish.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Riz, you talked about a ton of things last week. So this week, I kind of want to focus on something. A lot of traders have messaged me and asked me, the market's not picking a direction right now. It's kind of going up, it's going down. During the middle of the week, we just ranged like crazy. I was looking at the 1 hour and the 4 hour charts, and it's a mess. So why do you think that is? Do you think we're waiting for next week earnings, or it's a mixture of a lot of things?
Totally correct. I think we touched on FOMC minutes coming out. So that was one key topic. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a nothing burger, like we discussed on the stream. We were really looking for some tips and indications of a possible rate cut. Unfortunately, the notes didn't give us anything like that. If anything, it sounded like I personally heard some stuff about a rate hike, but there's some other folks that disagree with that, and I don't know. We just don't know. We just don't know. The Fed is independent.
Well, guess what,
they can
Riz?
do whatever they want.
They don't know either, brother.
Yep. So I think it's a mixed bag, that we also discussed. We've got NVIDIA earnings also this week. So, I think really it was hope for some of that. We've got resistance on NASDAQ at 25,500 that we haven't been able to get above. So I think until we see anything good from some earnings reports, it's going to be more the same. We hadn't had a choppy market in some time. The last couple of weeks, we've had some pretty good expansion and moves in the market. And I think we're finally seeing some of that uncertainty. And that uncertainty is translating into a choppy market that traders are getting eaten up and chopped up. So I definitely suggest looking at the higher time frames and, being patient with the trade, because, the trades are there, but they're early in the session, definitely not in the mid and afternoon sessions.
Yeah, so just a follow-up to that question. I know if you can catch a trend, you like to hold for those 100, 200-point plays. Did you kind of adjust your style this week? Did you scalp a little bit more, or did you get more stopped out in your trails, or how did that work?
Yeah, definitely. I was getting more stopped out in my trades, due to good risk management and moving my stops and managing it. I was able to navigate the week, and, I had a couple of good days, but I had a couple of bad days. So, it's just, more notes inside the trade journal for me, and to go back at the end of the, go back and review, see how I can adjust and pivot, especially if we're going to have more choppy markets.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the transparency because, everybody only posts their wins. And you can't just post your wins when you're live streaming for 3 hours a day. You see the wins, you see the losses. If your trading style isn't conducive to a certain market, the best you can do is what I call CYA, cover your. So if you can move that stop to break even, if you can trail that stop, mitigate your risk, maybe size down, just protect yourself when the conditions are going to be a little choppy. So absolutely love that. And at BluSky, we are transparent. We're live trading in front of you. We're calling things as real. We're humans. Sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we're right. Hopefully we're right more than we're wrong. That's why we're doing this, right? But yeah, it's always great to go back in the week and review. And you brought up journaling. Always great to journal. Go back, review your trades, see what worked, see what didn't. Always evolving. So absolutely love that. Now that brings up our recap from last week. Next segment, we're going to go into our market watch. We're going to look at the geopolitical climate. We're going to look at earnings, which I know this is going to be a fun discussion. And then we're also going to look at the economic data. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Our next segment is Market Watch, where we are going to discuss the geopolitical climate, earnings, and the economic data coming in this week. Now, I know what all the NQ traders are going to talk about this week, and I know who's going to talk about it, our Mr. Earnings. So we're going to save him for last. But Coach Riz, we're going to start with you. What do you kind of have your eyes on? What's on your mind? What's making you enter trades? What's making you maybe be a little hesitant on trades this week?
I'm a little bit hesitant with the war possibility with Iran. That's a big concern for me. There is some movements in the crude oil sector. We've had Oxy moving, crude oil's been moving, so there has been some money movement in those markets with the cost per barrel going up. The other thing I'm looking for as well as tomorrow is we've got consumer credit coming out. That's going to let us know if consumers are shopping. Are consumers spending more on tech, iPhones? Are they getting those AI subscriptions? If numbers beat on Tuesday, then we should see hopefully a tech rally leading into the NVIDIA event.
And we got Trump speaking after that. There's a lot going on. Now, I was hoping you'd bring that up because I know a lot of newer traders and traders that maybe don't follow the news or don't want to watch the news. How do you go into a week where there's like a looming threat of just something dropping at any time?
I'll usually risk down, so I'll start using mini micros instead of full size lots. So I usually decide on what kind of risk I'm going to put on, given the kind of nature of what the environment is. If we've got a calm week, I'll go a little bit heavier size. But if there is something like that we could have that kind of news drop at any moment, then I definitely will be sized down just to, cover my position. I can always scale in. There's nothing wrong with scaling in. And once you're in a winning trade, that doesn't mean that you can't add to a winning trade.
Yeah, I love that. And it always seems, I don't know, recently in the last year or so, this random news just comes out when you think, okay, there's nothing going to come out in the next hour. I have all this time, the setup's perfect, and then just boom, right in your face. So you always say this, de-risk, size appropriately. You can always add to winners, but don't add to losers. I love that. Absolutely love that. Now, Becky, what are you looking for? Is it something data-wise, climate-wise, earnings-wise? What are you looking at this week?
Yeah, I love the point about just always being careful about what might drop at any moment. And a couple things for me is definitely this range breakout. If we could get that this week, I mean, obviously we haven't seen Friday yet, and GDP might have a large influence on that. However, the first 4 days of this week have been not real impressive and very range bound. So two things I'm looking for next week is if we can get a breakout, and then we can have a little bit of directional energy. But then also on the Forex calendar, on my radar, obviously, it's kind of a light week news-wise in terms of scheduled announcements. However, on Friday, it is going to be on my radar that pre-market, the hour pre-New York Open is going to be that PPI information, producer price index. And so that has been strong over the recent months that it has announced. And so I don't know that we would expect a big change on that. But that is the news that could have an influence, could have some wiki volatility that day if you're trading at that time. So that is probably I just will avoid that. Honestly, I'm West Coast, so I don't prefer the pre-market news events just based on when I like to trade. But that is due on the Forex calendar, something that I want to pay attention to and be careful around.
That's great. And I love you said choppy days waiting for a breakout. Myself, I'm a break and retest trader, so I cannot stand this chop. Every time you think it's going to break out, it wicks you, and then it goes right back in this rage, and it's just bam. So I think
Like
we
I
might
don't
need
mind
this red
scalp.
folder.
I really, and I don't mind scalping, but I like a good trade, a good juicy trade, that I can scale into, I can scale out of, I can put some options on the side of it. Like I like a juicy trade, and this has not been the week for that.
Yeah, well, and that's one of those things where, once you get to the point where you can identify when it's going to be a range, identify when it's going to break out, you might tweak your style. Like, okay, I only want this, so let's
Yeah,
call it 15 points on NQ rather than
just
going for
hits.
50, 100, things like that. So,
Hmm.
yeah, great advice in general. All right. And now, first of all, Matt, one of these days, I'm going to get you to change this chart and this graph to Eastern time because I know it's bugging the heck out of our
Mm,
users.
good luck.
But we'll see. We'll
Hey,
see. But last but not least, Mr. Earnings. Now, we all know what the big earnings is this week.
It's
Let's hear about it.
Well, it definitely NVIDIA, but before we get into that, just a word on what Becky said, talking about kind of that short range. Riz, you were talking about that short range. Justin, you were complaining about that short range this week. I'd like to take the range of the market this week and punt it into the Pacific Ocean, like
Yes.
Will Ferrell did with Baxter and Anchorman. That's what I would like to do because I love catching a trend, and all we catch today is chop, 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 chop. Like that's
minnows.
it. Like you feel you have a pattern. It's like a break, and it's like, really,
Wah-wah.
really, 2 bars expansion here, seriously.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I will say, calm before the storm here, my friends, because Riz, you're talking about war, and Becky's talking about inflation, and you guys, NVIDIA. They are the number one catalyst next week, and there is not a close second, in my opinion. We all saw the economic landscape. Who cares about anything on that economic landscape? By the way, the PPI report is off schedule. That is a week off schedule, and I don't even know what to do with that right now.
They're just
But
changing it up on us.
Yeah.
they're
They
just
don't
throwing
care.
just no softballs right now. No softballs. They're all 105 mile an hour fastballs right at your head. So when I'm looking at the market, I think there's one question that a lot of traders and investors have is when is the market going to break out of the slumber that the market's been in? And over the course of the last 4 weeks, we've talked about so many different types of catalysts. We've talked about earnings catalysts, economic catalysts, geopolitical catalysts, and none of them have sparked any consistency in the market. The S&P 500 is broad range neutrality for 5 consecutive months now. The Nasdaq slight downtrend right now, but a better part of the exact same picture. In fact, the Nasdaq's been so downright boring over the course, not intraday, but over the last 5 months. The 200-day moving average caught up to it. Like that's how boring the Nasdaq has been. And so, yeah, dealing with a short-term downtrend, but the larger point remains: the market is in searching of a catalyst to create a easy, understandable theme to get everybody away from talking about 14 other conversations that don't necessarily matter, because the only thing that matters really to the market is what is this EPS, what is the revenue, and what is the forward-looking guidance. And when you think about what NVIDIA can do, there wasn't a company this week that had the ability to create a theme in the market. NVIDIA has that ability. They are the number one market cap company. They're the number one EPS company. They are the number one most important company from an earnings perspective for 3.5 consecutive years. This story goes back a long time. And if you know NVIDIA, you know that NVIDIA can go through sideways neutrality for a little bit of time, and then it gives us that uniting spark. You look at it all the way back out here. Once you got that breakout, look at the breakout right here back in second quarter 23. Breakout, run, consolidate. Breakout, run, consolidate. Breakout, run. All of those breakouts were propelled by earnings. And if you want to go correlate the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, to when NVIDIA reports earnings, you're going to see them do the same thing too, because they are the number one catalyst stock. So the market's been boring for five months. Yeah, we have intraday conversations, day trading, swing trading conversations, but for the investor class, it's been flatlined. It's this week, all of us are complaining about. It's them for the last 5 months complaining about the same thing. Well, we got NVIDIA coming out here, and we got the ability to maybe light a match here. And so I think it's NVIDIA by a mile. I'm very interested in what NVIDIA has to say next week. The levels are well known for NVIDIA, and NVIDIA, if they report fantastically and we get a positive catalyst, I'm willing to bet we're talking reversal analysis in software. I'm willing to bet we're talking about a double bottom in the Nasdaq, and I'm willing to bet we're talking about a 7K breakout in the ES. That's how important NVIDIA is. Now, one quick word, and then I'll let you guys kind of give me your thoughts on NVIDIA as well, because I definitely want to hear them. But it's NVIDIA isn't about the EPS story. NVIDIA is going to beat EPS. Like if they don't, I might be as big a perma bear as Becky is if they don't. That's number one. Number two, don't care about the revenue story, although it's going to be very impressive. Their revenue handles are going to be outlandishly good. The only thing I truly care about is two numbers out of NVIDIA. Everything else is important. I'm not trying to say it's not, but that guidance report out of NVIDIA better be an increase in guidance, because if it is not, we're coming down. And so I'm looking at guidance one. And when you're looking at guidance, I'm looking at an acceleration of guidance. We've seen in the last 2 quarters here, we've seen a beach, yes, but lesser and lesser and lesser. I'm looking for a reacceleration of that guidance report, number one. And number two, profit margin out of NVIDIA. Gross margin out of NVIDIA. If that thing's above 72%, let's giddy up and go, and let's go to Mars. Actually, Elon's not going to Mars anymore. Let's go to the moon with Elon, because that's what's going to happen with NVIDIA. So gross margins being above 72%, forward-looking guidance with an increase north of 3 to 5% in my estimation. That does the trick to get the market united. Without that, we're going to most likely deal with more chop.
Love it. Now, a general theme with traders, Matt, since you talked about 5 months of consolidation, are you in the school of thought, the longer the consolidation, the bigger the move?
Of course I am.
Okay,
I'm a white
just making sure.
Of course I am.
Yeah.
The size of the base, the higher in space, baby.
Love it.
So yeah, I am, both in terms of time and distance. And so in every aspect of charting, in every aspect of technical analysis, time and price. It's all about time and price. Time and distance, that would be the price. And so when you're thinking about kind of that length of term here, you're talking 5 months on NVIDIA, and you're talking about a neutral range that is about 25 points. You could expect on the expansion somewhere around most likely 220, 225 on the expansion on NVIDIA if they do have a positive catalyst and break out. And yes, I do think investors have a long memory here, and they'll be like, yeah, 5 months, give me another 5 months up, baby. Let's go.
I love it. Now, Coach Riz, I want to move to you, our resident NQ trader. I don't know about you, but NVIDIA week is like the Super Bowl for NQ traders. There's going to be a massive move. It might move up, down. We don't really know at the moment, but I'm kind of wondering how before you get into what you think is going to happen, how do you approach a massive earnings week like NVIDIA that affects NQ so much?
It all depends on the days of the week as we progress into it. If I was swinging in a position into the day prior, trying to catch it, I would definitely be looking at the London to try to get into that swing to see if I can catch a good low on it. I'd probably be will be observing it a day prior on the price action, just to see where we start setting lows and highs going into the week. So might offer some good entries into a swing position. The only other thing I would worry about is if it takes a day or two for the move to really start to happen and to accumulate into NVIDIA. If that's the case, it won't be till Friday or so, right? Because I think earnings is Wednesday.
I believe so, right?
Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
I'd have to double check.
Yeah, so depending on how the market reacts, the other thing is that NVIDIA just had that big deal with Meta happen. So how many units are they going to be ordering, and how big of a deal is that really going to turn out to be? Supposedly Meta's going all into it. So, it'd be interesting to see what those numbers translate into this week.
Well, and
Nice.
and
Now,
that's a great point. Can I just jump in real quick,
yeah,
Justin, on that?
absolutely.
Because that was a wonderful point by Riz on the Meta deal. Because we've seen increases in CapEx spend out of Meta, Google, Microsoft, Tesla. Like the major CapEx spend is going north aggressively. All that CapEx spend, there's only three companies that get a piece of all of it: NVIDIA, Taiwan Semiconductor, and ASML. Those three companies are the only companies get a portion of every single aspect of CapEx spend. Obviously, NVIDIA being the major player there, but there's only three companies. So I just thought that was a wonderful point by Riz.
Mhm.
No,
Thank
that's a
you.
great point. Now, when NVIDIA earnings do come out, Matt mentioned a bunch of different things. What's kind of most important to you about the data that comes out just regarding NVIDIA?
It'll be their forward outlook. That's going to be the most important piece of information that's going to come out of them. Going into the event, I'd like to already have a position and have some sell targets already set up, so that way if we do get some kind of volatility, I can just get in and be out. That'll be the nice thing about an event like that. But for guidance, how many units are they going to start to move? Are they going to finally be able to sell some of their chips over to China that have been restricted? That's another thing, because that could add another layer. Like Coach Matt is saying, we're looking for fuel for this rocket, and there's only one thing that's going to propel it, and those are those sales. Can we get China on board to where they can start buying the chips? And how much did Meta buy?
That's an absolutely great point. And let's move on to Becky now. I have a follow-up question, but first, I know you trade the ES, so it's not as much weight, but it's NVIDIA. Let's be real. It's gonna move. It's gonna move a ES.
Powerhouse.
So how do you approach earnings, and do you play it? Do you wait for it to come out? Do you sit the day out? Because I know you're big on risk management and the psychological side of trading.
Yes. So I like to trade my A plus setups, and I try to scale down or just observe the other ones. But for earnings specifically, actually, I'm going to put Matt on the spot, because what I like to do is lean into the technicals more so. Like, I want to be apprised of the fundamentals, but what I will do coming into big earnings like this for a superstar company is I will actually back test the earnings day, similar to my strategy with FOMC. So I'll pull up the NVIDIA chart, and then I will go back and I will look at the week of earnings. What was that chart doing? What was it looking at? Was it sliding down and then it popped? Was it climbing higher and then it dropped? And so for me, I do a specific deep dive into the week surrounding this event in the past. And then that gives me a good key indication of, does it tend to gap? And if it gaps, does it take it all back the next day? Does it tend to set up with a clear pattern before and give some tells? Does it not? And so for me, like on this chart here, I would look back at the last earnings, the last 5 to 10 if I wanted to play it and see. Like, it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it did a big gap up on earnings and then it took back the whole thing and more the next day. So that big outsized move, that's something I would want to be cognizant of. Say I was playing the long game and I entered along before or ahead of earnings, thinking that it was setting up for a pop. I would definitely want to have this in my mind, that if we are opening with the big gap up, to maybe lock in my profits, because it could take it all back with profit takers of those who front ran that position. So that is definitely my strategy coming into any earnings, and especially one that has potential power to have giant moves, is back test it.
Mm-hmm.
You just threw a giant wrench in my question, because you went technicals on me, and I was not expecting that. But
You're welcome.
you know what?
I'm keeping him fresh.
By the way, 100% spot on in assessing
Yeah.
the earnings gap.
But I
It's
also
something to
think
pay
that
attention to. I mean, you fundamentals are critical to understand as well, but what are you going to trade? What does it look like on the chart? What level will react? What would happen if it ran? What would happen if it gapped and fell? So these are definitely the biggest questions for me.
now you talked about technicals, but I mean, you brought up back testing, and I think back testing is so important to the psychological aspect, because if you don't back test, you don't know the strategy, you don't know what to do. How
Yeah.
are you going to trade it? So that's amazing that you brought that up. Now, one more thing about NVIDIA, rapid fire. Becky, up or down?
Oh God, shoot, I'm not ready.
You can say I don't know.
Up
You can
and
always say I
down.
don't know.
Up and down.
There
Gives
you
me plays
go.
in both direction.
There you go. Matt, what about you?
It's a tough one.
I
I'm
haven't
not,
back tested yet.
and I
Crap.
don't just mean the
I'm gonna
initial
say,
reaction.
I'm gonna
I mean the
say,
follow through as well.
I'm gonna say up less than the market maker expectation, but I'm gonna say up.
Okay. Riz, last but not least.
I'm going to say up as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'd be crazy to bet against it. I think it might spike, and it might say what Becky said. It might spike and then come back flat, end up being a non-event, kill the options. But I think you'd be crazy to bet against it.
This thing's been
Um,
consolidating long enough. Like it's not one of those high flyers that
mhm.
has shockingly the number one company in the market has lower bar expectation than it historically has had. It's still out of this world, by the way, but it's just lower because it hasn't had a lot of excitement recently. I mean, NVIDIA has been flatlined for months now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always love NVIDIA earnings because you know what? It gets the people riled up. And I can't wait to check back next week and just see what happened and talk about it.
Honestly, I'm like, let's go because I'm all
Mhm.
about a catalyst right now. I'm looking at Forex, it's not there. I mean,
Yep.
geopolitically, who knows? But this is something on the schedule that is definitely potential to catalyst for all the indices. So
Yep.
let's go.
Something
They
we can
are a
actually prepare
unifier.
for.
Let's see them unify the markets. Let's go.
Yeah, first off, let's just see some moves. I don't want to see this chop anymore. If
Yes.
you were sitting next to me trading every day, you wouldn't want to sit next to me. It's really annoying. I'll just tell you that.
You couldn't make today's price action exciting. It was
Oof. Oh
impossible.
my God. I don't care. I don't care how exciting or how cool of
Yeah,
a person you are in stream. It was boring. But all right,
it
that's great.
was.
That's what we're looking for going into the week. Now, next, we have something special for you. We didn't have a member to interview, so I am interviewing Coach Riz about his journey from when he first started, what he did wrong, what he did right, how he fixes problems, what problems he still has, and just his journey in general. And it's always so much fun just interviewing somebody who has just made it, gone through the trials, and you'll realize that everybody goes through similar things. So I cannot wait to start this, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome to one of my favorite segments, the interview segment. This week we are going to switch it up a little bit. We have Coach Riz here. We couldn't find a member this week, which guys, please message me if you want to be on the podcast. We'd love to interview all of you. We have Coach Riz here. We wanted to kind of get to know him a little more intimately, kind of learn about his actual trading journey because, you know, we just see the finished product. We just see the man, the myth, the legend, Coach Riz streaming all day. So it's always nice to see how people started and, you know, their journey, their trials, their tribulations, and how they finally found success. So thanks for joining me, Coach Riz.
Yeah, that's no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of want to give, I know people know a vague backstory, but you kind of want to give a brief introduction and maybe what got you into trading, what the time period was, what year it was, and what instruments you kind of started trading. Because I know most of us futures traders did not start with futures.
Yeah, definitely. I started in the late 2019, around that time frame. I've been looking at crypto before then and kind of dabbling in the markets and stuff, but nothing really serious where I take pen to paper to really get my learn on and get a better understanding of the markets, learn strategies and things like that. No, the crypto space got really was a wild west back then. Not that it isn't now still, but I started having exchanges that were closing. I was in Mount Gov, so I lost a few bitcoins in that shutdown.
Man.
And when they got hacked, and so I was already taking losses that I couldn't quantify into my trading. You know, a brokerage going belly up, you can't factor that into your strategy.
No, absolutely
You
not.
know, yeah, unfortunately not. So I needed to learn some new strategies and figure out a new path for myself. And I was risking money that I could afford to lose, but I couldn't afford to lose, you know, because I was spending time.
I think we all know how that feels when we first start trading.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, you know, I can afford to lose this, but I hated losing for the reasons I was losing. So I started looking at other aspects of the market, and that's when I started looking into stocks and options because it seemed like a more stable market that wouldn't have to worry so much about, you know, the odds and ends of market, you know, a brokerage collapsing, them getting hacked, and my money not being insured. So in that process, I came across some of my longtime trading buddies now, you know, because before that I had been trading by myself, and that was the point that, you know, I was going on YouTube, I was going on social media, and I was like, what is this? What is that? I had all these questions.
Yeah.
I had all these questions because the markets are so very different in options versus, you know, futures or crypto. You know, you don't have the Greeks. I had to learn the Greeks. And that was a huge thing because I didn't understand them at all. You know, there were the explanations were just so vague and kind of convoluted. There was no AI that I could ask further questions. So I really needed someone's help, and I got blessed, and I met like General DJan, Jay Wiz, Tip, some of the guys that you see inside the Discord daily. That I listened to them trade. I heard what they were saying, and I was just there, just taking notes, googling, until I was like, what can I ask? What is the proper way to ask the question? And then I started to kind of really understand the Greeks and the market, the options chain. And I got lucky because during that time was about the meme.
Oh yeah.
Meme trades were going on. You had GME, you had AMC, you had a bunch of biomedical plays that were going on, and that's in that time frame. Yep. We were doing bankruptcy plays, Revlon, stuff like that. So I was making
that was when all the short squeezes were happening too.
Yes. So I got in that, and I was just like, yes, this is awesome. Mm-hmm. I was sold. I was just hooked. I was like, this is what I need to be doing. But then, we had changes of presidency, things like that. The environment was changing. The media was changing. There was a lot of influence into the market that wasn't technical anymore because of the administration's first term. Mm-hmm. And, you could be in a trade, the market was rallying, and all of a sudden you'd have some news drop. The president said something, all of a sudden there goes the market. See ya. And it was like, what? It started getting kind of crazy, and the market was getting really choppy. And I noticed that the after hours session was having these crazy moves, but swing traders were doing good. The guys in the day trade were just getting annihilated. And I was like, well, I don't want to swing trade because that's still riskier than what I want. And the contracts cost more. And then if I tie up my margin, then I don't have any money to day trade. So I was in this catch-22. I didn't have as much money as I did before. And it was just like, I needed to find something. And everybody I was with wasn't trading futures. All my, back then, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, nobody was trading futures. Everybody was doing it. Yeah. It was all options traders. I was the lone soldier out of my group. And the guys were like, are you sure? They're like, hey, Riz, you haven't been with us that long to be moving over. And I was like, we're missing plays here. Yep. I was like, we're missing all this action. I'm getting stuck in the chop. I'm getting frustrated because I can't make $20 in the day. I need to find, my job as a trader is to find opportunity in the market, not marry the market.
100%.
I have to be flexible, and flexibility means that you may not be trading the same market. You may be trading futures. You may be trading options. You may even go into some precious metals or even crypto, but that's part of being a trader. That's first and foremost is being dynamic and learning. And those were the first things I learned. So it was like, why am I getting pushback? But it was really my friends that were worried about me. They didn't understand the markets, and they were worried for me because they knew I'm more risk prone. I'm more risk on, and I want those big gains, and you have to be kind of fearless in the market, but that's that's just kind of the way I trade and my style, so I started learning futures, started, scouring the web, and then it was just all of a sudden like, what do you mean? There's no Greeks in futures,
I was like, it's like, why would you not do this? It's options, but without the Greeks. It's so much easier.
Exactly. It took on all this complicatedness to the market, and it made it really simplistic to where I could just trade more naturally, stop, take profit. That's it. I don't have to worry about expiration, data, decay, all this other implied volatility. None of that. The Greeks are dead in the futures. It's funny. And I was like, hey, this is awesome. After doing that for a little bit, I started to go ahead and just, get my feel on in the market. I was like, how can I further take my trading? And then it just became a combination. The last 2 years has really been the combination of how do I balance my futures versus my options, and then when do I want to trade crypto? So now, I like to trade crypto on the weekends. I like to take the short on the weekends, and then cut it on Sunday, and then go into the futures market and see where the market takes me from there. So it's been an interesting journey, and but never have I been able to stop learning. There's always something new to learn in the market.
Man, they can't keep you away. You got options during the day, futures at night, crypto on the weekend, and I know you do the slot machines. You're just always doing something, right? Now, I gotta ask,
I love making money.
Yeah, me too. What drew you into crypto? Like specifically, were we on a big bull run, or is it in the news, or what? Like, what just made you get into the trading space in general that happened to be crypto?
So I'm a technologist. I owned IT companies in my past. So I've always just been into tech, and I had already been following Bitcoin, and I thought it was interesting. And
Okay.
I'm all about emerging technologies. So I've always been an early adopter in most technology spaces. When Google a few years ago put out the Google Glass, I had a set of those. I've had the Microsoft, Oculus. I've had different, technologies that were just like right at the beginning, and this was no different. I had already been monitoring it, and I noticed that there was an opportunity there. And I also liked that it didn't take a lot of money. Like when I would talk about learning to trade stocks and things like that, there was a stigma that you needed a lot of money to trade, to be a day trader. I had that stigma, and crypto didn't have that. I heard about all these guys that were trading with, $500 making, 10,000, 20,000. And I was like, I've got $500, I got $500 that I can trade in the market,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not much different than those guys. They may be younger than I, but that doesn't mean I can't learn the same game. And that's what it came down to. I saw that there was opportunity there that I was missing. And really the pinnacle that really drew me into options was my best friend, my best man at my wedding. If it wouldn't have been for Josh years ago that started talking to me about trading stocks and options, and he's a futures trader as well, in some businesses like I do, been a good friend of mine for years and years. And one summer he held a class for me and a couple of my buddies at his office. And he had a whiteboard up, and he started kind of talking about the, options and how they work, the margin, a little overview of the Greeks and stuff like that. Started talking about, selling covered calls, things like that. And I was just like, writing it down. I still wasn't into options yet or stocks, but I was still in the crypto space. But it was like right around the time that I was starting my transition, that I was starting to look at other markets and how to get into them and participate. And it kind of instilled me, because I was like, my buddy's doing this. I want to learn. So I started asking him. I would send him text messages, and I got lucky with Discords. Discords were the open the floodgates for me. It was like the book for me. Yeah, because YouTube and X is cool and all, FinTwits, but to get your questions answered, or to find people that you could actually like you and I have a conversation with and ask, well, what is this? And how does the implied volatility and, things like that, how does this work? I DCA into the position, and for someone to be able to dumb it down for me, that just was like awesome. And I wasn't paying for it. It wasn't, and there's no real college course you can take. There's no day trading college course you can take. So you have to find people in that sphere that are doing it and can talk to you and stuff. I got really lucky. I got really, really lucky.
That's awesome. I knew you were going to say something about IT, because I remember all my friends that were in IT or tech or something, they're like, this Bitcoin thing, I'm going to start mining it. And I'm like, what are you doing? This makes no sense. And then, they all made, they probably sold early, but they all made money. Now I want to fast forward a little bit when you started getting into options and futures. Did you have big wins early, big losses, small wins, small losses? Were you losing money for a while before you saw some green, or how did that go?
It was a mixed bag of results, just like any other trader. I had my windfalls and then I had my downfalls. I did have some spectacular wins. I had trades along the way that, I think one summer I nailed one trade that was like 15,000. Then I had an oil trade. Wow. I had an oil trade in a PA that I ended up taking like I think it was like 12,000. I was like out at lunch taking the trade, and I've been sitting in an oil trade like all day long. And it was a great trade. So I had some fantastic wins along the way. And that's what was justifying for me that I needed to be in this space because, you know, being able to talk about it, you know, seeing other people do it is one thing, but when you get to taste it and have your own success, it validates you being in there. You know, it's so hard being in the space. It's so hard being a day trader because you are an independent day trader. It's not like you work for a company with a bunch of day traders. You're in a bullpen and it's like vibing, hey, badass job on that trade, bro. I saw that. There's nothing like that. It's not that. It's not like that. You know, and that's what makes it hard because the wins are great, but when you're hurting and you're struggling, there's no one there to kind of
you stare at the wall and think you're an idiot. That's all you do.
Yeah, you know, you spill your coffee on the floor like I did today, you know, days like that, you know, you're like, dang, man, what happened? You know, but you take the good with the bad, just like anything else.
And it's funny because the day trading is one of the only jobs where you can go to work and lose money.
I think there's a few other industries you can go to work and lose money.
But it's one of those things where you're like, oh, I worked for 12 hours today and I lost $1,000.
Yeah, you know.
Now, when you were having these big wins, I'm assuming you had losses. Was your P&L chart steadily going up, or was it up and down and up and down? Some days are good, some days are bad, or how was your consistency in that time period?
You know, my consistency was a little all over the place at the beginning because I wasn't sure where to go with my trades, you know, and then you start building the facade that everything's going to be that easy. And I was still just, you know, I'm still just in my learning phase. It feels like that to me, you know, because I'm always learning. But back then, you know, I knew I couldn't just hold on to that and that be the only thing. You know, I knew that the 5%, you know, the compound gains. And that's what helped me early on. You know, I got humbled right away and the wins weren't easy. It took time to get into them. And then they were so infrequent that I knew it. You know, I could just tell. It was like, oh man, you know, having a couple of mediocre days in this grand slam, and then you get into like just that funk that, you know, you're just like break even, you lose a few bucks and you're just like trucking along. But that's the market rotation. That's the market rotation. You might be good at a week, that 1 week out of the month, and it comes every 1 week out of the month. And it takes a while to kind of learn the market, understand the trend that happens, you know, week by week, and learn enough of them because there's so many of them.
Oh, yeah. And I think when you first start training, you don't know that. You go into every day the same, just thinking, okay, I killed it yesterday. And I think these big wins when you first start really screw you over because you just think you can do it all the time. But then, you know, you do the same thing the next day and you just get absolutely smacked in the mouth. But yeah, that's I think every trader goes through that. Now I want to fast forward a little bit. You're in communities and stuff like that. And I'm very curious for you because you're a coach now. Were you blindly following other people in the beginning, or were you always kind of using your own thing?
No, you know, I did a mixed bag at the beginning. You know, I would look for other traders that were putting out signals, and I would take the trades. I'm not gonna lie, I took the trades, and I got burned. Some of my worst trades of my career were following other people's trades. That's the worst part about it, you know. And then it's like I can't get mad at that person because, well, you know what they're doing, you know, it was my fault. It was my fault. So I learned early on that. And then what I started to do was I started to look for influencers that had a really big following, and I would look for their bias. But then I got to a point that I can't look at anybody's bias. Like right now, like on my social media, I don't follow a lot of influencers. I probably follow only maybe like 3 or 4, maybe 5 folks that I could name off my hand that I follow.
It's just a lot of noise.
I know them. Yeah, and I know those guys. That's why I follow them. They're my friends. So I comment on their stuff. But I'm not trading with them and I'm not following their trade, you know, because it just doesn't work like that. And I want to be responsible for my own trade.
Right. Now at this point, so you've gotten past what I call the break-even cycle that every trader goes through. You have your big days, you have your small days, and then you have you're working for free basically. But I call that the tuition, the college. Those are your college days. You have to go through those. So now you've found your strategy. You're starting to see some consistency. Do you remember a certain moment when trading just kind of like clicked for you and you're like, oh shoot, okay, this is how you do it?
I think the biggest transition came when I let go of the money. when I finally like just didn't think about the money that I was losing, the money I was making, and just focused on the trade itself and got technical about it, and just by blowing eval, just move on. Just got to move on. And the faster that happened, and when that happened, it just went off like a light bulb, because then all of a sudden the trades became easier. I was able to pass evals faster, and I was starting to become more profitable, because then it became robotic, the trade. Oh, I got to get out of this. Oh, my stop, move on. It wasn't even me dwelling on it. I got stopped in the profit. It's time for another trade. What's the next trade? And that's when I started to feel it.
You know what? I call that process over profit, because I think when you focus on the money, the pressure is there. You have to make this money per day. You have to pass your eval today. You have to get the payout. But when you just start thinking about the process, I don't know if you think this, but the money just follows. Once you just follow your process and just don't worry about the money follows. And you know what's crazy? You mentioned don't think about the money. That's more of a mindset thing. And I've done probably 50 of these interviews documenting traders' journeys, and not one single person has said anything about technical analysis that was a ha moment. Every single person says something about the mindset. So we are all more alike than anybody thinks. So I love that answer. And now I want to get into this, because like, you obviously are a BluSky streamer. How did you start your streaming journey?
Oh, the streaming journey, I kind of just stumbled into that. I had been sitting in communities, and I had been running an old community of mine for a few years.
Okay.
Another influencer had gotten picked up by a firm, and he moved on, and he left the community behind. And when he did, he gave it to me, because I was so active. I was like his right-hand man. And we had a great following. Everybody knew me, and I was in the day session. So I would actually do what I was doing, like what I do for BluSky. I was doing it in another open community for free on the day.
Oh, okay.
It was part of my morning session. So I was already doing it, but I wasn't streaming across the board. I came across another friend of mine, and he recommended me to start getting into streaming. And that's where he had invited me to start doing like some gambling streams and things like that. And in that time frame, I started kind of mixing it in together, bringing in, my day trading, a little bit of gambling, and just kind of offset.
Just all the degenerates come into one space and watch me.
Exactly. Day trading by day, gambling at night. It was a good time. It's fun. It's
That's
fun.
amazing, yeah.
If you have the opportunity to leverage your money and have a good time, then why shouldn't you? The opportunities are there, but you always have to manage your risk and your losses, is what I always recommend. But my buddy got me in.
I love trading, especially like streaming, because it's kind of boring when you're just sitting there by yourself with Netflix on the background. But if you're streaming and you have people talking to you, you have a chat talking to you, it makes it enjoyable. Because like, let's be real, trading's really boring at the end of the day. You got to sit there, you got to wait for your setup. But if you have friends in there, people asking you questions, teaching, you're learning, it's great. And I think it also holds you, let me know if you think this. I think it holds you accountable too, because people are watching you. You can't do this degenerate stuff and just, then that never happened.
Yeah. Being in the midday session, it does present that difficulty, because there is always a lunchtime chop. So, the midday session can get tough. And that's why, now I've been bringing in other things that we can discuss in the midday. We talk about, current events, what's affecting the market. We're starting to talk about stocks, what stocks are in the Mag 7 are affecting NASDAQ, and that's part of the learning process, because it's not always about taking a trade. Being a trader is so much more than just entering and exiting a trade. There's studying, there's notes, there's journaling, doing your analysis, prep for the, longer dated trades, like I said, analyzing other markets, even paper trading. You don't necessarily have to be in the market to be a market participant. It's what I've always said to traders.
That's such a good point. And you don't always have to be in a trade either. Like you said, you can talk about other things, study all that kind of stuff, which we actually just talked about in the episode. So that just brings it right back. So we're almost out of time for this, but since you are a coach, since you are a successful trader, I always like to end this. If you could give a break-even trader or newer trader one piece of advice to kind of let them see the light of the tunnel. And I always say don't just say keep at it. If you had to give one piece of advice to help them feel that there is light in the tunnel, what would it be?
Have patience.
Mm-hmm.
Have patience. Losing is part of the process, just like winning. And the sooner you understand that and you accept the losses, the wins will come. But be patient. And we're all here for you. My DMs are open.
I think that, yeah, and I think that patience, it's not just about trading too. Patience in your life. If you're patient in other things, you can be patient in trading. Well, Riz, thank you so much. It's always awesome to talk to traders, especially successful traders. And like he said, his DM's always open. He's in the stream every day. If you have a question, it doesn't even have to be about trading. It can be about anything. He'll shoot the stuff with you and give you an answer. So I'll see you back in the server, Riz.
You got it.
Coach Riz, I had so much fun interviewing you, and I didn't really know your trading journey. I just know you as the trader you are. So it's so cool to hear, the beginning, the middle, and where you're at now, and that you're still looking to improve. Because I think that's one of the biggest things as traders: keep learning, keep improving, keep studying, keep back testing, keep journaling. So guys, listen to the journey. He's a successful trader, full time now. Doesn't get any better than hearing from these successful people. And now, my personal favorite subject or segment. Ask a Coach. These are questions from real BluSky members, real traders at any point in their journey, some new, some old, but these are questions I want to ask to full-time successful traders like our coaches here. So let's just get started. And I'm kind of curious about you, Matt, because you've been trading the longest out of all of us.
Mhm.
I think maybe longer than all of us combined. But I'm very curious.
We're gonna have to add up the time frame on that. I'll take the over.
I think I would too, man. I think I would too. But I'm very, very curious because this is a very pivotal moment in every trader's career when they decide to go to full time.
Mm-hmm.
When did you first feel like you could rely on only your trading income?
About 5 years in.
5 years in. That's a great, honest answer.
When I first started trading, it was 05, 06, 07. And I was just a young trader, just getting to know kind of who I was as a trader, to be honest with you. I thought I knew, probably looking back, 20 different times, and then I figured something else out. That's the journey of every trader in the first 2 years. You finally get to the point where you're like, ooh, this is who I am. And then you're like, nope, I just got hit by a buzzsaw and got knocked in the face by Mike Tyson and need to go back to the drawing board. So the first couple of years I learned in a bull market, a pretty consistent bull market, and then the subprime meltdown occurred. And
Oh, that was right. Yeah, a few years into it.
yeah,
Wow.
that was, you want to talk about nasty. You guys haven't ever seen anything like that.
Well, what's the Mike Tyson quote? Is everybody has a plan till they get punched in
Everybody
the
has a
face?
plan
And
till they
that's
get
08
punched
for
in the
you,
face.
right?
And I was even kind of bearish going into '08. I was very, very opposed against the Fed, and I had direction picked right, and it was still extremely difficult. People don't understand true volatility until they deal with a deleveraging event. And then that will rip your face off faster than absolutely anything will. But I learned very valuable lessons in that environment, trading on the bear side of the equation, catching what you could. But I was still a younger trader, started out fairly small. But then in 2000, after that, and once I mentored with an options mentor in 2010, taught me how to do cash flow strategies. And once I started embracing cash flow, there was something happened to me from a mindset perspective that I felt like every day, if it was a loss, wasn't the end of the world. And because all of a sudden you have other things working for you outside of just active trading. And so for me, it was the combination of both, focusing on the day trading side of it, which it was at the time, it was Forex. It wasn't futures. It was Forex for me. So it was cash flow with covered calls and credit spreads, and it was currency on the day trading side. And once I learned how to cash flow, I stopped. It actually made me a much better day trader and a much better swing trader, to be perfectly honest with you, because it loosens your mindset. You're not as stressed. You don't get hit by volatility as much. And so it was about 5 years, and after I learned how to both day trade and cash flow.
That's great, and that's honest. Because I was hoping you weren't going to say 6 months and say It just came so easy to me.
I think that's insane.
Yeah, agreed. Now I have a question for you.
You haven't even learned multiple different trends on the daily
Mhm.
chart yet. What are we talking about?
Yeah. Now I have a question for you because I went through this when I transitioned to full-time trader. Like, when's the right time? Is there a certain amount of reserves you need to have in the bank? Is there a certain amount of money you make per day? Or like, what was kind of the switch that made you switch to just relying on that for your only income?
Um, well, again, I've never ever just relied on trading for my
I
own.
was hoping you'd bring that up. Okay.
Like that's I'm not that guy. I love
Mhm.
business. I'm an entrepreneur. I love building businesses. Trading is one aspect of
Mhm.
what I do, and I would recommend that for absolutely everything. For everybody. I don't think anybody should rely solely on one source of income because if
Mhm.
you listen to any of the great entrepreneurs of the past, it's all always multiple streams of income.
Mhm.
Trading is one of the best. It's one of the funnest. But it's also one of the more volatile ones. And so you want to have some consistency on the cash flow side of the equation. In fact, I read a study one time. I don't know if it's still true today, but it takes 7 streams of income to create
Mhm.
that consistency that you want and to create that legacy you want. Because
I've
for
heard the same
me,
number.
Same.
I don't do this just to get by, you know what I mean? I'm doing this, and what I mean I'm doing this, I mean my life, my business, my everything is so that when I am, you know, 6 feet under and everything's done down the road, that I have that legacy to leave to behind. And so for me, it's much more about just than the trading side of the equation, and I would recommend that for most people.
Yeah, but that's raw and honest. And you know what? When I was only full-time trading, the stress is unbearable. I think you should use trading as an
Too
avenue to
much.
start other
Uh,
businesses. And you didn't touch on this, but also you don't get benefits when you're just a trader. You don't get retirement, you don't get any of that stuff. So I think multiple streams, divvy up everything. So just in case you have a bad month, bad year, things happen that you're going to be fine and always have some kind of reserve. So
The one
great
answer
answer.
I didn't give was how much.
Hmm.
I think you need to have at least 100,000.
Hmm. I was more saying I think
I'm talking like
one year of
retirement, cash
reserves.
Six
flow.
months coverage or
Yeah,
whatever.
six
Yeah.
months to a year, something like
Oh,
that.
in 6 months. Six
Okay,
months
yeah.
is the standard.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I love that answer, and I could keep talking about this, but maybe we wait for your interview and we get more into that. But that's
Okay,
great
dude.
advice.
If you don't make me cry, Justin, it's not a real interview.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. I don't know. We'll see. Now, this one I want to ask you about this, Riz, because you live stream your trades. You live stream for the most amount of time about any of the coaches here. Do you still get nervous before you take a trade, especially because you're live streaming?
You know, I think the first like 3 or 4 months in, I did get nervous. And, the biggest obstacle is when my schedule changes because then I have to adapt to a new market cycle for that time frame. So that presents a different obstacle. So I think it's just a matter of getting over that and then finding the patterns that are presented. The midday session that I'm hosting now is a little bit more complicated. There's a little bit more chop. Early in the lunchtime, sometimes you'll catch a little bit of that trend and then a bounce back. And then we just kind of taper off and the volume's kind of gone, and I try to emphasize that for the traders, is that, start early. It's a good time of day that you can do replay on your charts, get into some sim trading. There's other things you can do if you feel so inclined that you need to participate in the market. Bust out that journal, start paper trading, get with AI, start putting in some of your trade ideas, see if you can come up with your own indicators. Some of the new tools available to traders are just phenomenal that it doesn't always have to be trading. You can be doing something that's supplemental that on the backside is just taking your time, but it's something that might turn out to be a great tool or asset to you in the intraday.
Yeah, that's great because trading doesn't always actually involve taking the trades. There's so much to it, and I think futures is kind of taking that out of people's mind because I remember when I just did options, at nighttime that's when I back tested, that's when I journal things like that. But I think because futures is open full 23/5 or whatever it is, it's just like I can always take a trade. You don't have to study things like that. So that's a great point. And AI, oh my God, I wish I knew about that when I first started trading. Would have made life so much easier. Now, I do have a follow-up because I'd asked if you get nervous before trades. How do you personally tell the difference between healthy caution and when you're actually scared or nervous?
Guilty conscience, because I don't really have any issue with the trade. If I start getting nervous, I have a sizing issue. I probably am low on my balance on the account and probably oversizing. In that instance, I'll start reevaluating the position and trying to decide, what exactly am I trying to do? Am I trying to save the account, or am I that flustered that I just don't care anymore? And then then I have to make the decision. I have to draw the line in the sand. Can't have my cake and eat it too. And I have to be realistic to myself, because there's only one person that can hold you accountable on trading, and that's yourself. So you have to understand what you're doing in that instance of, the last $100 left in the account. What are you doing?
Absolutely amazing answer. And I love that because it always comes back to mindset. You know how to trade at this point. It's just a mindset issue. And last but not least, Becky. Now, I know you've gone through strategies. We've talked about it. You bounced around at the beginning. How did you actually find the strategy you use now? And when did you kind of know that this was what you wanted to use?
Ooh, good point. So when I started learning from a company when I was a baby trader and didn't know anything, I knew that I loved trading, and I would catch some trades honestly accidentally because I was following someone else. But when I switched to a different mentor and he started teaching me about value areas and volume and price migration and context, it was like, like, oh my God, there's actual like information that could pull this together for me. And so it was learning from that mentor that actually sees the market kind of like I do. I think we have a similar just brain chemistry. And he started just teaching all these different angles of the market to me, and it was painting this picture so much more clear. I feel like before that I had like 12 random puzzle pieces that I was trying to make work, like a toddler with the puzzle that's for an adult, you know what I mean? Like that was a mess. But once it was like I had more puzzle pieces, I could create a full actual picture of what and why and what it would look like if this was happening, what it would look like when the bears are in control or the bulls are in control. And so learning that, I guess, contextual understanding of the market, and if value is migrating, if it's contracting, what it would look like for a break versus more of a rotational play. That is where I was like, okay. So for me, learning from him and from that community, more the general understanding of what the market is trying to do and how I could get on board with that. That's when I finally saw the consistency in my trading, and I was able to expand upon that, start to increase my leverage, start to take payouts. And so I think that was the turning point, was someone who saw it my way and was able to bring the picture to some clarity in my mind, where I actually felt like I was connecting dots, and then I could trade more effectively by a long way.
Beautiful. And well, my follow-up question was, did you learn it yourself or from someone else? But you mentioned you had a mentor. So another follow-up question, how long did it take before you fully trusted this system? Was it back testing? Was it forward testing? Or did it just take some time?
Time. I did some back testing, but my life is kind of bananas. It's very busy. And so I would just trade every day that the market was open, unless something outsized was going on in my personal life. But I think it was actively trading, showing up to that community, building relationships with other traders is something I'm a huge proponent of, because even if you can't talk to your mentor or whatever, if you have someone who sees the market with a similar lens, being able to be like, I thought this was happening, what did you think? And kicking that back and forth with a couple of close people really helped me have a stronger understanding of developing my trades as well. So honestly, it was just the early few years of like eat, sleep, drinking the market, of like really just digging in to try and grab that understanding. And so by showing up for that work day after day after day, that's what brought the clarity to me over time. And I think I couldn't rush that. I mean, I think people like to make it fast, but for me, I had to let it take time and just see it day after day after day. And then slowly, steadily, it just came to me quicker.
Yeah, I think time's a great thing because, you're not going to know if it works immediately. You have to see it in action. You have to trust it. And, you jump from strategy to strategy. You got to stick with it for a little bit to see if it's going to work. So that's an amazing answer. And all three questions, I think all of you coaches crushed it out of the park as always. So that wraps up this week's episode of Skycast. We talked about our predictions from last week, what we're looking at for this week. And I think we can all agree it's NVIDIA. I cannot wait to bring it up again next week and see what happens, see our reactions, all that. And then once again, guys, welcome 26 for a 50K launch plan, $30. You're not going to beat that to get daily payouts. One of the best sales in the industry for our new traders. Now, other than that, I've enjoyed talking to you guys so much. I had so much FOMO not being here last week, so it's great to be back. But until then, if you guys want to be on the podcast, we want some of our members on here. I want to hear your journeys. I'm looking at a few of you. I called you out in the live stream today, so I'm going to keep bugging you until you message me. Other than that, if you have any questions, shoot me a DM. My name is Justin on the server. If you have any questions, message any of the coaches. Until then, stay profitable.